Hi guys, and welcome to a new devlog of my indie game Raidborn, which is a sandbox action RPG set in an adventurous fantasy world. Follow me along and enjoy interesting behind the scenes footage and actively participate in the development of the game. Now let's see what I have for you today. Recreating the castle levels from scratch, including a massive temple room and a majestic King's Hall. Do you remember those old castle levels? And do you also remember that back then I promised to rebuild the castle levels from scratch? Well, know what? This time has come now, so I created some new and better looking ones, and my main goal for the new tiles were to make them larger and to make them look much more majestic, because that is what I had in mind for the castle ruins. Of course, I already had most of the stuff to create those new castle ruins. However, later you will see me improving some wall parts and adding some more detail to the overall architecture of the tiles. As so often before, I started with the entrance tile of the castle. As you can see, I tried to add some more detail, and overall the layout is much larger and allows me to place much more detail and also looks more believable in the end, but you will see that when I will add details, which we will do, or which I will show you in the next devlog video. An example for this detail here is that little brick part, for example, in the corner between the ground and the wall, which wasn't existent in the old version. To ensure good quality, I imported the tile every now and then to see if it looks good or if I can find issues, and that is what you see here. As mentioned before, I then decided to create some new walls, or to improve them a little bit, and to, for example, add this pillar here and to integrate it into the model, and also add a roof part so that the transition from one wall type to another looks better. I had those parts before. The only difference now was that I integrated it into one model, which just makes it easier for me, so I have kind of pre-made models which I can use. And it overall makes it easier for me to ensure a uniform design throughout the castle ruins. When the tile was finished, I again imported it to the game engine to take a look how it looks and if it meets my expectation, if stuff needs to get tweaked or fixed, and I was trying to fix those last remaining issues. Then I started building the main tile, which I planned to be a very massive hall. I later can, for example, build a temple inside. At least that is what I have in mind for the first detail I built for it. Of course, I can also place something completely different in there with the help of my object collection system, which spawns objects randomly. Again, I also did an in-game test with that, and this time I also added a red light to the player to more or less reflect a torch, and just that I can see the details a little bit better. But I have to say that the contrast of the blue global light and this red light from the player looks really nice, and I actually made use of this later when I was trying to find a nice color mood for the castle. So it's funny how you sometimes learn new stuff or get inspiration. So now I think it's a good time to compare the old main tile with the new main tile. And as you can see, the new one is way larger. Really, it's really massive, and that's what I wanted it to be. Maybe it's actually even a little bit too large, because the problem is in such a large tile the view range is also much larger and stuff like that, so that could be a little bit of a problem for the performance, for example, but we will see. So far, you can consider those new tiles final. Of course, there's always some stuff to tweak, but in general, everything I create here is more or less final. That also goes for the caves and for exterior levels. Although, especially regarding the exterior levels, there is some more work to do, you know. I will make the tiles a little bit smaller, and as I said in the exterior level video, I will also replace some of the vegetation, stuff like that. But the castle tiles now can be more or less considered final. Then I created two other very important tiles, which is the side tile, and later I will also show you the separator tile, because what you see here is the side tile. And later this could, for example, be a tavern or a brewery or storage room or a weaponry or stuff like that. This tile here in particular isn't that much different from the old version. The only thing that changed is that I, of course, added a little bit more detail to the architecture, and it used the new wall parts and stuff like that. And it also has more exit points, because I think the old one only had 2 exit points and the new one now has 4. So this gives the tile more options to be different every time it's getting generated, because an exit will be somewhere else, and also more rooms can get generated to this tile. And here you see the separator directly in-game, because, you know, we already took a look at how I built everything. There's not much more to show, will be a little bit boring. So here, the final result, and I think it looks much better now and is much larger. And afterwards I will also show you the old separator tile, that you can get an idea. By the way, don't get confused by this weird red looking thing at the stairs. This is just has to do with the physics. You see this every now and then. Sometimes it's white, sometimes it's red. Because, you know, the physics of the stairs are actually a ramp, so I use that red thing as physics, and the stair itself has no physics. So that's a little trick I use in my game, and I think is generally used in game development to simulate traps, or to make traps easier accessible for the player and for enemies and stuff, you know. And yeah, that's it so far for the separator tile. And now we will take a look at the tile which has changed the most, and that is the end tile. But first let's take a look at the old tile. And as you see, it's really very narrow and relatively small, and also feels a little bit unnatural, and I really didn't like how it looks. And also when I built this the first time, I didn't really plan it to be so small. I wanted it larger, but for some reason it turned out to be relatively small. And as you can see, especially the throne room, I mean, it doesn't even deserve the name throne room. It's relatively small, and I wanted something more massive and majestic really for the castle, because I really want, you know, an epic castle, and not something which is so narrow and feels unnatural. And larger tiles also mean more details and more space for me to play around with, and this allows me to implement more ideas, and maybe even more interesting ideas. Now let's take a look at how I built the new end tile. And as you can see, I tried to make it much bigger really, and I think now the end tile much more reflects that majestic feel I aimed for. Although I'm a little bit unsure, because maybe it's even a little bit too large, especially not sure about that storage room below the throne room, because, you know, the more space there is, the more work I have to put into a level design or in the detail of the tile. And as I'm a solo developer, I have to take care that things don't get too massive, because at some point I also would like to release the game, okay? But yeah, now let's take a look at how this King's Hall looks in game. And as I've promised and said multiple times now, it's from much larger scale, and it looks much better and allows me to really add some cool details in there. I already have very cool ideas, and I can't wait to fill it with nice details. And I also had to adjust the generation code a little bit so it again works with the castle levels. You may wonder why I have to do this, because it already worked in earlier episodes. Well, the reason is that lately I adjusted the code, the generation code I mean, to work with the cave levels and with the exterior levels. So a lot of stuff changed and the generation of the castles didn't work out of the box, so I had to make some tweaks and fix some bugs and stuff like that. But as I've said before, those castle tiles can be considered final. Although I will of course change the generation system a little bit so the levels feel more believable, because that's something which is a little bit tricky about generation system or level generation in general, that often levels feel generic if you generate them. You know, those words are connected, generation, generic, that's where it's coming from. So that's something I would like to improve in the future, but so far I'm pretty happy. And regarding the tiles themselves and the designs of the tiles, that is more or less final. Okay, now it is your turn, and I would really like to hear your thoughts and your ideas and your feedback for the new castle tiles. Of course, again, the details are missing, something we will take care on in the next episode. But still, tell me your thoughts. And I will read every comment, and if you have questions, tell me, you know how it goes. Also make sure to subscribe to my email newsletter if you would like to get notified about beta tests I may do in the future, and game release of course and stuff like that. I also sometimes post a newsletter or write a newsletter when I upload a new cool devlog video. And last but not least, stay tuned, stay cool, and have a wonderful day.